2 trillion Kenya shillings. Please show us the corresponding development projects. Where is the impact on Wanjiko? Fellow Kenyans, further, our country is trapped in a dangerous borrowing cycle. The Grand Coalition government under the late President Mwai Kibaki, the greatest president of our time, borrowed Kenya shillings 1.3 trillion in 10 years. The Jubilee government under President Uhuru Kenyatta borrowed 6.7 trillion in 10 years. This regime, a one-man show, has borrowed 4.2 trillion in 3 years. Today, as we speak, our public debt stands at 13 trillion Kenya shillings. The debt to GDP ratio is at 72.4%, which is far beyond the legal ceiling set by the Public Finance Management Act 2023. Ordinarily, a ratio of 55% debt to the GDP should guide fiscal restraint. But more troubling is the fact that interest on debt is currently at 1.3 trillion Kenya shillings per year. This is 79% of our revenue. The interest on debt has become the largest consumer of public revenue. In practical terms, the government is working first for leaders, then for the people, and we, the people of Kenya, are on our own. Dear Kenyans, I have been on record several times on the crisis our nation is in. Out of the 4.2 trillion Kenya shillings borrowed recklessly by this regime, only Kenya shillings 1.9 trillion went to the development expenditure. This is in direct contravention of Article 211 Constitution of Kenya. It also contravenes Section 152C of the PMF Act that prohibits the government from borrowing for recurrent expenditures. What kind of a household borrows a loan from a bank to buy food? To make the matters worse, the budget statement to be read next week proposes to borrow an additional 1.114 trillion Kenya shillings. Out of this, only 700 billion Kenya shillings will be spent on development. Where is the Kenya shillings 400 billion? This is budgeted corruption. In the financial year 2024-25, the government targeted to raise 2.75 trillion Kenya shillings, but collected only 2.26 trillion Kenya shillings. The revenue target was missed by Kenya shillings 487 billion. Why? In the financial year 2025-2026, the target was raised to Kenya shillings 2.92 trillion. The collections are at only Kenya shillings 2.04 trillion, leaving a shortfall of Kenya shillings 877 billion. Despite this persistent underperformance, the government is projecting tax revenues of Kenya shillings 2.86 trillion in the financial year 2026-2027. We are well advised that a realistic projection on revenue collections will be at 2.29 trillion Kenya shillings. Kenyans should expect a worse tax regime midway and lots of failed promises as usual. As the DCP party, we note with great concern that the expenditure projections of this regime continue to grow at a pace completely out of touch with Wanjiko. For example, a teacher in Wajir who earned a gross pay of 50,000 Kenya shillings in the year 2022 took home a net pay of Kenya shillings 42,000. However, and unfortunately under this regime, the same teacher takes home a net pay of 38,000 Kenya shillings. This is to skyrocketing food and fuel prices, and to a country where the roads are poorer, schools are no longer get capitation, and healthcare no longer works. Another example, in the year 2022, a basket of essential goods stood at Kenya shillings 14,000. Under this elite regime, it is now stands at 25,000 Kenya shillings for a medium-sized family. In addition to a shrinking payslip, Kenyan households are no longer able to save or afford essential goods for their families. Above all, the purchasing power has been sunk. This is while the wages remain stagnant and taxes keep soaring. Fellow Kenyans, the result is not prosperity. The result is economic fatigue, reduced consumer spending, shrinking margins for businesses, and rising public anger. Kenyans remain under deep unspoken stress. In the budget statement, we have made a closer examination of sectoral allocations, reveals a worrying shift in Kenya's national priorities over the past 3 years. Kenya's priority sectors are education, health, and agriculture. These sectors touch every Kenyan and every facet of our lives. Previous informed and caring governments gave priority and adequate funding to these sectors. During the Grand Coalition administration, education continuously received between 20 and 25% of the national budget, making it one of the government's highest priorities. Under the Jubilee administration of President Uhuru Kenyatta, education remained a major priority, receiving between 24 to 27% of the national budget. Under Mr. William Ruto, education funding has fallen to 16.2% of the budget. This drop is felt directly by the parents who are being forced to pay for primary and secondary education, school, college, and university education. The gains made in free primary and free day secondary school education are all being blown into oblivion. What is the future of our children? Why is this regime at war with our children and our youth? Why are you killing our future? Under the budget estimates of 2025-2026 financial year, agriculture remains at crossroads. Traditionally, agriculture has been the backbone of our economy. The sector has been traditionally been receiving between 4% to 6%. Under this regime, agriculture has been grossly defunded. Only 2% of the total budget has been allocated to this sector. This is despite the fact that this sector employs a majority of the population and remains the socio-economic backbone of our rural livelihoods. Mr. President, why are you defunding agriculture? Did you consult the over 7.1 million registered farmers and the 40% of the total population and nearly 70% of the rural workforce depending on agriculture? On matters health, the sector has historically received between 6 to 8% of the total budget. Unfortunately and painfully, under the current budget estimates, the sector has been allocated a portly 3.5% of the total budget. This is despite the fact that Kenyans are paying more taxes and higher share deductions than ever before. What is more important to citizens of any nation if not healthcare? A healthy nation is a wealthy nation. In any case, a nation's greatest resource is its people. These people must be healthy and productive. Despite suffocating critical sectors, the government continues to increase allocations to non-essential expenditures. The presidency and State House have continued to expand up to 17 billion in this year's budget. This is funding opulence and corruption. What does State House need Kenya shilling 17 billion for? Are there schools and hospitals in State House? Fellow Kenyans, between the 2022 to 2026, allocation to the security docket steadily rose from Kenya shillings 318 billion to Kenya shillings 567 billion, an increase of Kenya shillings 249 billion without corresponding improvement in securing the people of Kenya and our territory. Why this sharp increase? Why do we still have Jubilant forces still occupying Mandera County and harassing Kenyans? Why are goons working alongside the National Police Service? In recent months, the government has continued to channel billions in travel, hospitality, and administrative overheads, while ordinary Kenyans are being asked. Supplementary estimates show that Kenya shillings 8.4 billion was allocated to State House alone for hospitality, domestic travel, and vehicle operations, while the Controller of Budget flagged Kenya shillings 10.8 billion in travel spending in just 6 months. At the broader level, recurrent expenditure continues to dominate the budget. Approximately Kenya shillings 1.2 trillion has been allocated for operations and maintenance